Hi, Adam Campbell here from Podcast RX to bring you a special bonus episode. Hopefully you remember our last regular episode before we went on a little winter break. It was titled Anticipating the Arrival of the COVID Vaccine, and our guest was Deborah Milito, Director of Skilled and Consultant Services for Diamond. We discussed where things stood with Operation Warp Speed, the development of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and how pharmacies were planning for the rollout, among several other areas. Now, that was recorded back in late October, and that was well over a month before the first patients in the U.S. received the vaccine in early December. As of February 1st, over 31 million doses of the vaccine have been given in the U.S. so far, so things have changed considerably since we last spoke with Deborah. In the meantime, Deborah did record a COVID vaccine town hall for one of Diamond's long-term care customers on January 20th, Inauguration Day. She answered some frequently posed questions about the vaccine, how we got it so quickly, how mRNA works, what to expect when you get a shot, when you can expect to be vaccinated, and so on. And while this was geared to a long-term care facility staff in Pennsylvania, Deb does provide a lot of great vaccine info that a general audience could benefit from. This town hall was a Zoom call that Deborah presented from her home, so please excuse the occasional chimes in the background. So while this is not a standard episode of the show with a sit-down interview, consider it a companion piece to our original COVID vaccine episode. Without further ado, here's Deborah Milito. This is Podcast RX.
And then finished with some frequently asked questions. So we'll begin with, how did the vaccine come to market in less than a year? So a lot of people think that happened too fast, but there are about 4 reasons of how that happened. The first reason is that the government paid $10 billion to the pharmaceutical companies to research and manufacture the vaccines. That's 10 billion with a B, which is a really unheard of amount of money for the federal government to give to any drug company when they're trying to research a new medication or vaccine. Secondly, the technology that was used. The name of the technology is messenger RNA or mRNA. Now, most people think that's a new technology, but it is not. It's been studied for about 30 years with other viruses such as Ebola and cytomegalovirus. And as recently as January of last year, it was being studied for influenza. But the husband and wife team that work at a company in Germany called BioNTech, they put that aside, the study for influenza, when the pandemic hit. And they started to study messenger RNA for SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the virus that causes COVID-19 disease. And they knew that they were onto something. So they contacted their colleague at Pfizer in New York City and asked for their help. And that is why it's called the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. There's another vaccine also, and it's called Moderna. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I want to explain to you how messenger RNA works. And I want you to think of it from sort of a social media platform like email and Snapchat. So if you think of the messenger RNA as the email that goes into your arm via the IM injection, it travels to where it needs to go. It starts to form antibodies, which can fight off the virus if it should attack. After it does its job, it disappears, just like Snapchat. You know, Snapchat lasts for like 10 seconds. It's the same thing as this. So that is a very simplistic way of explaining how messenger RNA works, but that's how it basically works. There's more involvement, but I just want you to understand that this is something that's been studied for over 30 years. So that's the second thing about how the vaccine came to market as quickly as it did. The other item that I wanted to talk about is the little differences between the two vaccines. The Pfizer one is a 2-dose IM injection separated by 21 days, whereas the Moderna is, again, 2 doses IM or intramuscular separated by 28 days. So There's a little bit of a window, like it doesn't have to be quite 21 days. It could be 19 to 23. And the Moderna, which is 28 days, could be 26 to 36. It's just important that you get both vaccines in a timely manner. Okay, here's the third thing that happened. There were 44,000 participants in the Pfizer trial. That is an awful lot of people that stepped up and said, I want to be part of the solution. We don't usually have that many people in a vaccine trial, but that was a considerable amount. And what that actually means is that about 22,000 people received the vaccine and 22,000 received the placebo. And broken down into that groupings were different age groups, different races, different genders. So they looked at a whole lot of different people. And they also were evenly distributed between each set of people that were in the study. As far as Moderna goes, there were over 30,000 participants in that trial. Now, you might have heard that there are 3 phases to clinical trials: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Typically, the way that works is the drug company raises money, gets phase 1 started, they discuss the findings, they raise money for phase 2, get people enrolled, to discuss results, raise money for phase 3, and so on. But because we're in the middle of a pandemic, all 3 phases started at the same time. They did not wait to get results. They kept going. And that was very smart on the researchers' part to do that. At the same time, the drug companies felt very confident in their vaccines. They began to manufacture at the same time. So no one had to wait till after the results came in. So we'd still be waiting. We wouldn't have the vaccine right now. So, they had the money. So that's why they were able to do it. So I hope that makes a lot more sense to everyone as to how the vaccine was able to be researched, manufactured, and distributed in less than a year. It's really quite remarkable. Now, a couple things to mention. Operation Warp Speed was a military operation, still is, that was responsible for getting that vaccine out the door and into the arms of all of us. Now, they've done a great job of distributing it to the different states. The states are where we're sort of having a hang up right now of their distribution to different assisted living, personal care, nursing homes, places like that. So we're hoping that improves as time goes on. And there's a new administration that was just sworn in, an hour ago, and that may make a difference as well. So there are different phases to receive the vaccine: phase 1A, phase 1B, phase 1C, and phase 2. There's a lot of phase information, isn't there? So phase 1A is for healthcare workers and residents in long-term care facilities. So what does a healthcare worker look like? All of you. So if you work in a hospital, a long-term care facility, outpatient clinic, home health care, a pharmacy, emergency medical services, and public health, there are 21 million of us, and that's a lot of people to get vaccinated. But you heard in December that the government wanted 20 million people, which is pretty much the healthcare workers, to be vaccinated by the end of the year. And that didn't happen. But the push is on to get that moving along. The other part of phase 1A are those people that live in a nursing home, assisted living, and other residential care, which is your group. So that's phase 1A. That's where we're at right now. Now, every time I give one of these presentations, I think something can't change again, can it? Oh, yes, it can. It's a very fluid situation. And what changed yesterday was that the Pennsylvania Department of Health said that anyone that's in phase 1C, which are adults, any adult with a high-risk medical condition, and other adults 65 and older get moved to 1A. So what are high-risk medical conditions? Cancer, chronic kidney disease, COPD, heart failure, obesity, pregnancy, smoking, diabetes, moderate to severe asthma, hypertension, liver disease, to name a few. That's not the complete list, but you kind of get the idea behind that. So let's say you're 45 years old and you have hypertension. That moves you to 1A, not 1C. The problem is the pharmacies and doctors' offices aren't quite set up yet to handle this demand. So what's being done is you can register for a vaccine, but they just don't have it yet. But they're going to give you a projected date, like if you were in the community of trying to get one of the vaccines. So what I would say to you is, if you have the opportunity of a pharmacy like CVS or Walgreens coming to your facility, you'd have to jump on that to not have to go through all the hoops that everyone else is going through that lives in the community to get the vaccine. So, certainly contacting as a healthcare worker, if you're not getting it at your facility, then you need to contact your PCP, contact the pharmacy that you typically go to, contact the Department of Health. I know it is frustrating to do all of this, but it is going to lighten up. It's just that we're in a hypersensitive stage right now, with this vaccine. It's fantastic that there's such a great demand for it. That's what we want. That is what we need. We actually need at least 80% of the United States population to receive the vaccine for any hope of getting herd immunity in the near future. And then to be complete, phase 1B, as in boy, are all other essential workers, such as teachers, people that work in the food business, transportation, firefighters, police officers. So they've actually started to immunize teachers that I've heard of. Okay, so I want to move on to what can you expect when you receive the vaccine. So yesterday I received my second dose of Pfizer, and here I am today giving this presentation. I took a walk this morning. I was on 2 other Zoom calls before this one, and most importantly, a little bit later on, I have a hair and nail appointment. That's definitely at the top of my list. So I made a plan to do everything I normally do. I was being very optimistic and positive, and I'd have to say that after my first immunization, like 22 days ago, my arm hurt like the first day. I took a Tylenol. It was resolved. The second day, I had a little bit of a headache. I took a Tylenol extra strength. I was fine. Today, after my second vaccine, I did have a sore arm when I woke up. I took an ibuprofen 600 milligrams. I'm fine. So you can have what's called localized reactions, which is what I described by having a sore arm. No redness, no swelling, but that could happen. I would say take ibuprofen or Tylenol or put a cold pack on. You should be good. As far as systemic side effects go, you might have a feeling of being very tired or just an all-over general feeling of malaise, or maybe some muscle aches. Again, over-the-counter preparations will resolve most of those side effects, and it just means the vaccine's working if that should happen. You cannot get COVID disease from the vaccine. It is not a live vaccine. So actually, when you get the vaccine and you have some sort of reaction, that's a good thing. That means it's working. It's starting to energize your immune system. So something else that we want to try to prevent from happening is that if we were to have COVID disease, whether it be mild, moderate, or hopefully not severe, and we recover from COVID disease, down the road, we could get what's called the long haul effects. And you've probably started to hear about some of those, such as blood clots in the lung or the legs, or arrhythmias that attack the heart. There are chronic or acute kidney injuries. And then 2 telltale signs that you may be COVID positive is if you lose your sense of taste or smell. Well, those can be extremely lingering symptoms, and people have described them as, it tastes like I ate something burnt and it just doesn't go away. If you know of anybody that has experienced that or currently experiencing it, they tend to like ice cream because it's very cold and there's some texture to it, and they seem to be able to enjoy that, but hopefully that's not happening. If you are of childbearing age and trying to conceive, or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, it is recommended that you receive the vaccine, because if you were to develop COVID-19 disease while being pregnant, you could have complications to the pregnancy. You should discuss this with your OB and make it a shared clinical decision between you and the healthcare provider. You've probably heard about severe allergic reactions to the vaccine, and that is rare. But when it has occurred, it basically has occurred in people that have had a prior serious allergic reaction to an injectable medication, whether it be an IV, intramuscular, or sub-Q, or to a vaccine. So if you've had a severe allergic reaction to an injectable medication or vaccine, and all vaccines are injectable, then if you were to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, you should receive it under medical supervision and make it a shared clinical decision. If you have allergies to pets, the environment, to different foods, you should be observed for 30 minutes after you receive the vaccine. All other people should be observed for 15 minutes. So some questions that I often get are, if I've already had COVID-19 disease, why do I have to get the vaccine? The reason that you have to get the vaccine is because the antibodies that are produced when you have the disease only last for about 90 days. So that's why you need to get the vaccine, so that it confers a longer immunity for you. The second question, after I get my first dose of the vaccine, am I good to go? I don't have to wear my mask anymore, etc. That's not true. After the first dose, it's only about 56% effective, give or take a few percentage points. So you have to wait until 2 weeks approximately after your second dose for the vaccine to be 95% effective. So as far as changing your protocol about social distancing, hand washing, and PPE, that would be a decision that would be made by your ownership via CDC guidelines. That wouldn't be something that any of us on this call would make that decision. What if I'm late getting my second dose of the vaccine? It's okay. Get it as soon as you can. You do not have to repeat the series. And if you start with the Pfizer vaccine, you end with the Pfizer vaccine. If you start with the Moderna vaccine, you end with the Moderna vaccine. If they were to get mixed up for whatever reason, it's okay. You do not restart the series. Do the vaccines affect fertility? They do not. That is a Dr. Facebook is what I call it, myth. It's just being generated on Facebook, and it's just false information. That concludes this presentation. If you can stop recording, Nicholas, but I will take questions from the audience.
This podcast features conversations with healthcare professionals. Their statements and opinions discussed herein are for informational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered professional medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for the advice of an appropriately qualified and licensed healthcare professional. Therefore, listeners must not rely on the statements made herein.
Podcast RX is a production of Diamond Pharmacy Services, the nation's largest correctional pharmacy provider. Catch our new episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate the show and leave us a review. And if you have a topic you'd like to hear about on the show, or you'd like to share your thoughts on an episode, you can email us at podcastrx@diamondpharmacy.com.
Music in this episode by Wolfgang Worley. Sound Express by Getty Images. Additional music by the 126ers and Silent Partner.